Since 2008, Chief Deputy Gualtieri has served in his current capacity as General Counsel for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and as Chief Deputy, second in command to Sheriff Coates. Chief Deputy Gualtieri is in charge of all day-to-day agency operations, including overseeing the agency's 2,700 employees and a $220 million budget. Deputy Chief Gualtieri also has experience as a patrol officer, serving with the Dunedin Police Department from 1983 to 1984. And between 1982 and 1983, Deputy Chief Gualtieri worked as a Pinellas County Sheriff's Office detention deputy assigned to the Pinellas County Jail Maximum Security Facility. Deputy Gualtieri graduated from Stetson University College of Law in 2002 and Eckerd College with a BA in American Studies. Deputy Gualtieri is a member of several associations to include board member of the Sheriff's Police Athletic League, charter member of the Rotary of East Lake Sunrise, the Gold Shield Foundation, Suncoast Tiger Bay Club, and is a lifetime honorary member of the Florida Sheriff's Association. At this time, I would like to introduce to you Chief Deputy Bob Gualtieri.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak with you this evening. Chris did a great job telling you about my background, so there's not much more to set forth for you except to tell you that that experience, and especially starting back in 1982 with the Sheriff's Office in the jail, and being a city cop in Dunedin, and after coming back to the Sheriff's Office and working throughout the entire agency in patrol and investigative operations and narcotics, has served me well now and today. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, as Chris mentioned, is a large organization. It's a large business, and it is a $220 million a year business with 2,700 employees. And the sheriff in the Sheriff's Office is an independent body. It's an independent entity, and I just want to take a second to talk to you a little bit about that, because I feel very strongly about it. Is the sheriff is an independent constitutional officer. And as that independent constitutional officer, there's only one group or one body, if you will, that the sheriff is responsible to, and that's you, and that's the citizens, and that's the voters. The sheriff doesn't answer to the Board of County Commissioners. The sheriff doesn't answer to the county administrator. The sheriff doesn't answer to the governor, for that matter. And the governor, only in a case of misfeasance or malfeasance, can remove the sheriff from office. But as far as the budget's concerned, as far as the operations of the sheriff's office is concerned, that is solely within the purview of the sheriff, that is elected by you and answerable to you. And it's very important that the sheriff be accountable and that the sheriff operate his office in the most efficient way possible. The sheriff's office is divided into three major components. And the law enforcement component is the segment of the sheriff's office that you all are probably most familiar with, because that's the law enforcement deputy on the street driving that marked car that responds to calls for service, comes to your house, business, etc. And on the law enforcement side, the sheriff is responsible for primary law enforcement within the unincorporated areas of Pinellas County and 12 of Pinellas County's 24 cities. 12 of the cities contract with the sheriff as the primary law enforcement provider. The sheriff also has the only full-time Marine unit in Pinellas County for all the waterways. The sheriff also has the only flight section, which is very, very important for officer safety and support of all the K-9 units throughout the county, and for water rescue, for missions that involve finding people who are lost, especially in dense areas, wooded areas in the north part of the county, that type of thing. So the sheriff has some unique functions. The other thing that's unique on the law enforcement side is the sheriff is the only law enforcement entity in the county that is responsible for tracking sexual offenders. And our sexual predator and offender unit works from Tarpon Springs all the way down to Tierra Verde, and we do all of the sexual predator and offender tracking for every law enforcement agency throughout the county. On the investigative operations side, with detectives and narcotics, we operate county-wide. So the law enforcement responsibility is big, but it is really not the largest part of the sheriff's office operation. The largest part of the sheriff's operation is the Pinellas County Jail. And as Chris mentioned to you, and with my background, I worked in the jail for a year. I've done that job, and I was in that facility and learned a lot while I was there. And it helps me today because the Sheriff's Detention and Corrections Bureau is 52% of our operation. It's 52% of our budget. We have about 1,100 people that are assigned to the Detention and Corrections Bureau to operate that jail facility. The average daily population at the jail is about 3,100 inmates. So it's a very big place with a lot going on, and it is the biggest component of the Sheriff's Office. The next segment of the Sheriff's Office is the Judicial Operations section. And under that umbrella, we're responsible for providing court security at the 5 courthouses throughout Pinellas County, as well as serving all civil process, subpoenas, etc. So there's a whole court processing section in addition to the court security section. One number that is a fairly staggering number is the sheriff holds 57,000 warrants for individuals' arrests in Pinellas County. And we used to have, and I'll talk about the budget and the budget cuts in a minute, we used to have 16 dedicated law enforcement officers to go out and seek these people who have these arrest warrants and put them in jail. But with the budget cuts in 2008, those 16 positions were eliminated. So we don't have dedicated detectives, deputies to go out and seek these people with the warrants. Now the patrol deputies do it, and it's a catch-as-catch-can basis. So the Sheriff's Office operation, again, is large. The law enforcement function, the detention and corrections function, and the judicial operations, which is court processing, all of the papers that need to be served, and court security. And as we talked about, the Sheriff's Office budget for FY11, the approved budget is $220 million. In the last 4 years, and I've been responsible for the budget for the last 4 years, and as Chris mentioned, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Sheriff's Office, overseeing all of what I just told you. And in addition to that, as a lawyer and as the general counsel, I'm also responsible for the 4 lawyers who represent the sheriff. We brought all of our litigation in-house several years ago. We used to use the county attorney's office. We used to use the county risk management system. And frankly, I found it to be cost prohibitive and too expensive to use and not efficient. The first year that we brought it in-house and did it ourselves, we saved $1.4 million in our budget that year because we're doing it differently and we're doing it effectively. The last 4 years in overseeing the budget, we've cut $108 million from the Sheriff's General Fund budget in the last 4 years. We've eliminated 616 positions, 167 law enforcement deputies, 250 detention deputies at the jail, and the balance are non-sworn positions throughout the agency, including many layers of supervision and management. We're a very lean organization. Part of the budget cuts involved closing 7 facilities at the jail. The jail itself, as I mentioned, has an average daily population of about 3,100. If all of the closed facilities were open, it would have a capacity of about 4,300. And with the 3,100 inmates we have, we average today about 200 on the floor every day because we don't have the staff, we don't have the facilities to accommodate that population. It's very important that we effectively manage the jail population. At one point a few years ago, the jail population was close to 3,800 as an average daily population. And that's not manageable today. It's not manageable in the current environment in which we have to work. So we've changed a lot. The Sheriff's Office is not the same organization that it was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. As you in your personal lives and your professional lives have changed, so have we. None of us are operating the same way we were several years ago. It's a different world, it's a different environment. What we've had to do, and the approach that we've taken, is to do it differently. We have re-engineered the entire agency, and we're delivering services differently. Some people use the phrase that you have to do more with less. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's an accurate characterization. I'm not sure you do more with less. What you do is you re-engineer it, you deliver it differently, you deliver it as effectively as you possibly can. So against the backdrop of $108 million in cuts in the last 4 years and 616 positions eliminated because of a lot of hard work by a lot of dedicated law enforcement officers throughout the Sheriff's Office, In the last 2 years, we've reduced the crime rate in our service area. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is responsible for publishing statistics on the crime rate, and the first half of this year's statistics came out about a month ago. So in the last 2 years, we've reduced the crime rate. For the first 6 months of 2011 compared to the first 6 months of 2010, the crime rate is down yet again 6.9%, almost 7%. Arrests are up and case closures are up. So we're doing it effectively. We're delivering the services differently. We have a lot less people, but we're getting the job done. The agency's on the right course. The agency's on the right track. We are not out of the woods as far as the budget crisis is concerned. There's a lot more work to be done. And how we have managed this is by looking into the future, looking 1 year out, looking 2 years out, and having a strategic plan that will allow us to accomplish our budget objectives, our budget goals, our budget reduction requirements. There is not 1 year, that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office in these last 4 years of significant budget reductions has not met the target set by the Board of County Commissioners so that the county's general fund can be managed. We've stepped up, we've done our share, we've done our part. We will continue to do that until we reach a point where there's nothing else that can be done. There are some areas of the agency where that line has already been drawn in the sand, and one of those areas is the number of law enforcement deputies on the street. We're at waterline. We can't go any lower. But there are other areas where we can continue to gain efficiencies, continue to look for more effective ways to do it, to streamline operations, and to save money. Because we know, based on the current projection, that the deficit for FY13 to the county's general fund is about $9 million. We will have some share of responsibility for that reduction as well. I mentioned to you that we've cut $108 million in the last 4 years. We've cut 616 positions. One of the problems and the reason why we had to cut so much is because we got too big. And I believe the agency got too big because of what happened under prior administrations. By contrast to what we've done and what I've been responsible for doing for the last 4 years, under former Sheriff Rice's administration, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office budget grew by $83.4 million, 68%. It grew by 810 positions. So we had to cut 616 of those 810 positions the Sheriff's Office grew under Everett Rice. The days of solving problems by spending money are over, and they're gone forever. Some might even ask the question whether they should have been here to begin with. Maybe we wouldn't have had some of the problems that we do if things were done differently. And we looked at being efficient as opposed to solving problems by spending money. Give you an idea as to the efficiencies that we've gained, and these aren't my numbers, these are the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's numbers. The average law enforcement officer to citizen ratio in the state of Florida is 2.3 law enforcement officers for every 1,000 citizens. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office today is operating at 1.6 deputies per 1,000 citizens. And if you take the deputies that are assigned to the bailiff section, the court security out of that, it's more like 1.4 deputies per 1,000 citizens. In the city of St. Petersburg, the ratio is 2.3 per 1,000. In the city of Clearwater, it's 2.2 per 1,000. So because of technology, because of challenging people to do their best, because of restructuring and re-engineering, we've reduced the crime rate, we've reduced the budget, and we are doing it with many fewer deputies than what is the state average. Again, 2.3 is the state average, and we're doing it with 1.6 or 1.4 when you take the bailiffs out of it. It's all about effective government. It doesn't have to be big government to work. We challenge our people, and one of the greatest satisfactions that I had is implementing change when people think it can't be done. Human nature is resistant to change. There's a saying that if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you always got. And if you're not willing to challenge the status quo, and you're not willing to test your limits and test others' limits, you're never going to achieve new heights. And part of this process has been testing people's limits. And one of the greatest satisfactions I have is that when we implement something and people look at me like I'm nuts and say that it can't be done, and they say, let's try it anyway, and they come back afterward and they say, you know what, that worked, and we're able to get it done because we implemented change. Do we get it right 100% of the time? No. But if you don't try, you're never going to get there. And the best thing you can do is to try it. If it doesn't work, admit that it didn't work, and figure out a different path. And that's the way that we've done it for the last few years. Another important way to gain efficiencies and to be effective, I believe, is through significant intergovernmental collaboration. I'm a big advocate and a big believer in government and governmental bodies working together and collaborating. Through economies of scale, we can save money, we can be more effective and efficient with what we're doing. We've partnered quite a bit recently with Mayor Bill Foster in St. Pete and the St. Petersburg Police Department and other law enforcement agencies throughout the county. We just formed a Violent Crimes Task Force with St. Pete to address the gun crime that is prevalent throughout the county today. We saw that earlier in the year with the shootings of the 3 St. Petersburg police officers and other indicators of gun crime being on the rise. So we formed a task force with them. It's working very well. We've also formed partnerships to address what is probably the most significant law enforcement problem our country faces, and certainly the state of Florida faces, and Pinellas County faces, and that is prescription drug abuse. And it affects everybody through all socioeconomic classes and all walks of life. It affects young kids, it affects elderly people, and the big problem is its accessibility. If you go back to the crack cocaine days of the 90s, you go to the powder cocaine days of the 80s, the significant sources of supply for those drugs were coming out of those source areas of South Florida, Miami, or South Texas, or the Arizona border, etc. The problem with prescription drug abuse is it comes from Walgreens and CVS, and it's readily available. And it bleeds over into other crime. It bleeds over into thefts and robberies and burglaries, and it affects everybody every day. It affects you when you get that carpet cleaner that comes into your house who you don't know is addicted to the prescription drugs, or has a family member that is, asks to use your bathroom and then cleans out your medicine cabinet. It happens all the time. Or you come out of Walgreens and you got a bag in your hand and somebody knocks you over to take the bag from your hand, or goes in there and sticks up your pharmacy, etc. So prescription drug abuse is is the most significant law enforcement challenge that we face. And we formed a task force. We have now about 17 law enforcement officers in our task force to address this issue throughout Pinellas County. We're making some progress, but we got a long road to go because it's such a significant problem. Another collaboration that we formed was with St. Petersburg in the opening of Pinellas Safe Harbor. And we opened Pinellas Safe Harbor as a jail diversion program. What was happening with the homeless population throughout Pinellas County is the cities were using the criminal justice system, and specifically the Pinellas County Jail, as a solution to that problem. And it is not and was not a solution. The criminal justice system became a dumping ground for that social problem. You had people that were sleeping on cardboard boxes in downtown St. Petersburg, or in the woods in Clearwater, or in the woods in Largo, or on the street corner in Pinellas Park. And the police had to do something about it. They didn't have a place, they didn't have a resource available to address the issue. So they would charge these people with ordinance violations or very minor state law crimes like trespass, and they bring them into the Pinellas County Jail. It costs $126 a day to house somebody in the Pinellas County Jail. There's a man by the name of Alan Mason, and he was living on the streets in St. Petersburg. And the St. Petersburg Police Department, because the jail and the criminal justice system was their solution to this problem, arrested Mr. Mason 74 times. They brought him into the jail. He spent 560 days in the Pinellas County Jail, costing you and me and all the taxpayers $80,000 to house him because the man didn't have a place to sleep. The list of Alan Masons went from that wall to that wall. And we said this has got to stop. This isn't a solution. This is exacerbating the problem. So we took one of those closed jail facilities and we opened it as a jail diversion program. We partnered with the city of St. Pete. We partnered with virtually every other municipality in Pinellas County to open Safe Harbor. Right now we've got about 450 people there, and we're housing them there for $20 a day, as opposed to $126 a day in the county jail. Safe Harbor opened January 6th of this year. For the first 6 months of this year, the ordinance arrest bookings at the county jail are down by 44%. It's saving us money, it's saving us personnel. It's a better solution than the criminal justice system. That figure of $126 a day is just to the sheriff's office. That didn't include the cost of the state attorney, to the clerk of the court, to the judges, the public defender, and everybody else throughout the criminal justice system. There's a lot of success stories. We're using some grant money to get these folks into case management and through counselors and get them employed. The only way we can effectively break this cycle is to get them employed and become self-sustaining, contributing members of society. And we encourage them all to do that, and we're working toward that. But the important thing is we're keeping them out of the jail, and which is a very, very expensive place to deal with a social problem. So that level of collaboration has paid off for us. This race, my campaign, is about the future. It's about going forward. It's not about going backward. It's about progress. It's not about regressing backward. And I'm very fortunate in this race to have the endorsements of Sheriff Jim Coates, Sheriff David G. from Hillsborough County, Sheriff Brady Judd from Polk County, several state representatives, several state senators, county commissioners, the other constitutional officers in Pinellas County, Pam DeVoe, the property appraiser, Ken Burke, the clerk of the court, Diane Nelson, the tax collector, about 20 sitting city commissioners throughout the various city commissions and city councils throughout Pinellas County, 8 mayors, Bill Foster, Frank Hibbert, Bill Mishler, Andy Steingold from Safety Harbor, Jim Roniker from Oldsmar, many elected officials throughout the county, and about 130 established community and business leaders. And I'm very humbled by that support. I'm very grateful for that support. And I believe I have their support because I've demonstrated I can get the job done. And the rubber needs to hit the road. People need to stop talking about things and get it done. It's time for action. It's time for movement. It's time for no more meetings. It's time for things to happen, and that's the approach I've taken, and that's why we've been able to do what we've done in the last few years. In the days of solving problems by spending money and throwing people at it are history. What the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office needs is long-term, effective leadership from somebody that's proven that they can do it. The future is important. Public safety is very important. And I'm committed to providing the most effective and efficient public safety and ensuring the safety of the citizens of Pinellas County in the future. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you here this evening. I appreciate everybody's support and vote on August 14th of next year. That's when the Republican primary is. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We have a list.
Please.
And I'll stand in the back so you can respond to the
Sure.
group at large.
Sure.
These questions came from the RSVPs that we received tonight, from the members that are in attendance. That was one of the things they had to do when they RSVP'd for this meeting. They were asked what they would like to ask you. So in no particular order of how we received them, simply we compiled them on a sheet of paper. So I'm just going to start with number 1, and we'll go as far as we can. Question number 1, how do you feel about the military and police working together to police the general public?
That doesn't have a place at all. The civilian police have a function, the military has a separate function. those two shouldn't be mixed.
Okay. As we saw during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, would you follow an order from any authority to take guns away from non-criminal citizens?
And the question is, would I follow an order from any authority?
From the governor during a state of emergency that said, go into people's homes and take their weapons.
You know, in that question, and I want to respond to the question. I want to be responsive to the question. And it is somewhat of a hypothetical question because there's absolutely no authority in the law for anybody. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment. People have a right, and it is on the hierarchy of rights. Those constitutional rights are the highest, and I believe in that. And there is nobody that I'm aware of that can issue an order, a lawful order, to take guns away from citizens en masse. And I certainly wouldn't enforce any unlawful orders. I don't envision and could never fathom a situation where somebody could try and tell the sheriff or tell a law enforcement officer to take guns away from lawful citizens where they're lawfully possessed, because there's no legal basis for it. So, if there was some order given and it was an unlawful order, of course I wouldn't follow it.
Good answer. What is the current pursuit policy of the sheriff's department? And if you could make any changes to it, what would they be?
Could you repeat that question?
What is the current pursuit policy of the sheriff's department, and what changes to it would you implement?
Well, I wouldn't change it because I think we have a very good pursuit policy. The pursuit policy now, it's very stringent. And when a deputy engages in a pursuit, the deputy has to do it for a serious violation. We don't chase for just traffic. We don't chase for minor offenses. We chase for those offenses that are serious crimes where somebody needs to be apprehended because they're a threat to public safety. When that deputy initiates the pursuit, it's the responsibility of an on-duty supervisor to acknowledge that pursuit is occurring. The deputy or any on-duty supervisor can immediately terminate the pursuit. The deputy is required to call out on the radio the fact that they're in pursuit, what the speed conditions are, what the weather conditions are, the reason why that they're pursuing the person, and importantly, do they know who the driver is? And if they know who the driver is, we need to terminate the pursuit. We have a lot of procedural safeguards that are in place, including a pursuit review board. I review the pursuits every single month. We discipline deputies who are not in compliance with the policy. We provide remedial training where necessary. We keep those stats and we monitor it very closely. Engaging in law enforcement pursuits needs to be reserved for the most serious offenses, the most serious crimes, and I think we have a very responsible policy. At the same time, the bad guys, the criminals, the people that are committing those serious crimes need to know that under the right circumstances that law enforcement is going to pursue them, is going to apprehend them, and is going to put them in jail. It has to be balanced. It has to be balanced against protecting the public and not unnecessarily taking risks against protecting the public from people who are trying to hurt them.
Do you agree that police forces are becoming somewhat more militarized? And what is your opinion on this? For example, we see in Tampa SWAT teams dressed in black military boots, Kevlar helmets are coming off of their buildings, not looking like law enforcement personnel, but more like a paratrooper.
Well, I don't think that's happening here in Pinellas County. It's certainly not happening at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. The only component of the Sheriff's Office that may have some of the equipment that you're talking about would be our SWAT team, and they only wear that when they're engaged in SWAT operations because there's a tactical need to do it. Other than that, The deputies are dressed as you see me here today. Some of the community policing deputies may wear a gray polo shirt and black pants, but we're not the military. We don't need to be the military.
Do you support red light cameras?
I support red light cameras only and only for public safety. I'm 100% opposed to red light cameras when they're used to generate revenue. And unfortunately, I believe that many of the cities that have implemented a red light camera program are doing it for the wrong reason. They're doing it to generate revenue. And one of the ways I think that you can look to determine what that municipality or that governmental entity is motivated by is how they treat right turn on red violations. If they're citing everybody and causing people to pay a $156 ticket because their tires don't come to that absolute complete stop, oh my God, okay, because you take that right turn on red, that's revenue generating. It needs to be based on an officer's observation, being reasonable about it. If it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and somebody comes to a turn and it's a right on red and they slow down to whatever 2 miles an hour and there's no cars around any place, there's nobody in the crosswalk, and they do it safely, does that really warrant a ticket? That's not reasonable. I don't think that's a good decision. Now the other side of that coin is it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they go to make that right turn on red, they're doing it at about 7 miles an hour, and a pedestrian's got to move out of the way because they almost bumped them. That's a different story. I really believe that the most effective traffic enforcement is through education. I believe it has to be a deputy or an officer that sees it, that makes a decision based on good information. What's the driver's history? Are they a safe driver? Have they not had a ticket in the last 10 years? Or the other side of the coin is, have they been stopped 4 times in the last month because they're engaged in traffic violations? You don't get that with red light cameras because it's somebody looking at a monitor and it's very rote as opposed to making a good decision.
Has the latest round of budget cuts this year, or will the round of budget cuts next year affect morale of the deputies?
I think so. The deputies have not had a wage increase in the last 4 years, and in some places 5 years. The cost of their health insurance has gone up. The cost of living has gone up. And anytime that you have the significant changes that we have been through as an agency, you're going to have some degree of morale that's affected. But I can tell you this, is that we're very concerned about it. We're very aware of it. We try to do everything we can to support the deputies. And we do an anonymous survey every year. And personnel throughout the agency can anonymously respond to the survey. And for this past year, the survey came back and favorable morale was over 80%. And under the circumstances and what we've been through, I think that's very good. We just got through negotiating a collective bargaining agreement with the PBA that represents the deputies. And the deputies decided to switch from the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, over to the PBA, so we had to negotiate a new contract. I decided to engage in those negotiations myself this year. We've had some rocky roads in the past as far as negotiating these contracts with the union, and I decided to sit at the table myself so that we could develop a rapport and we could get it done. And I believe it was in 4 bargaining sessions we reached a tentative agreement and the deputies approved the contract. We were able to make some non-economic concessions. The flip side is that they made some concessions for us to allow us, through our health insurance and some other aspects of the benefits package that needed to be, circles need to be closed on. And it was a really good give and take. And I think we, at the end of the day, ended up with a fair agreement, a fair contract. So I think that's helped, but sure, across the board is that there are people that have been affected financially, and sure, that's going to have an effect on morale. Is it a bad problem? No, I don't think it's a bad problem. I think it's a problem, and I think there are some people in any organization, if you study management at all, you're going to find, and they're going to tell you, that about 5% of any organization are going to be your naysayers. And no matter what you do or how you do it, they're going to be miserable. Those are the people that I call, if they won the lottery, they complain about the color of the money. You're never going to satisfy them. And if you try, you're spinning your wheels. But overall, I think we're fine. We would like to be able to do more for the employees. As the budget turns around, we'll do what is the right thing.
Follow-up question to that, are you seeing a significant attrition rate due to budget cuts?
The attrition for the longest time was flat, and nobody was leaving. And I think that was a sign of the economic times. Now that the economic times have gotten slightly better, some would say, we've seen increased attrition. We see people that are going back to school. We see people that are moving to different areas. In fact, we're hiring law enforcement deputies now because we had unexpected attrition. I think some of that unexpected attrition also came from the change in FRS and other factors, but we have experienced some attrition. So we are seeing an uptick with attrition, yes.
And I'm going to ask this question exactly as it came to us. What in the heck is happening in South St. Pete? Seems like a murder every other day.
Well, let me preface my response is that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office is not responsible for policing in the city of St. Petersburg. That's the St. Petersburg Police Department. Now, with that said, is that the sheriff is the law enforcement officer for all the people throughout the county. And it gets back to what I said to you a few minutes ago about helping, about collaborating. And that's one of the reasons why we formed with Mayor Bill Foster and Chief Harmon in St. Pete, formed this Violent Crimes Task Force to address violent crime throughout the county and specifically in St. Petersburg and more specifically in South St. Petersburg. We have 6 deputies and a sergeant. St. Pete Police Department committed 6 officers and a sergeant. We supply the lieutenant. This Violent Crimes Task Force, which has been out there about a month now, is designed to improve the level of safety throughout the county, including South St. Pete.
Do you feel that Florida Concealed Weapons Permit Program has significantly reduced violent crime in our state?
You know, I don't have any information. I can't really answer that because I don't have any statistics or a way to judge it. I'm a firm believer in citizens being allowed to carry concealed firearms. I think that the fact that it's there, common sense would tell you that it's going to provide some level of deterrence. But I don't have any statistics or any data where I can give you an informed opinion on it. My hunch is that if people know there are citizens out there with concealed firearms permits and carrying concealed firearms, that it's going to make them think twice about doing things. And I wholly support the rights of citizens to carry concealed firearms.
If the Florida legislature were to pass a similar law to Arizona's SB 1070, their immigration law, regarding asking for proof of citizenship during traffic stops, and the federal Justice Department told you to ignore that law, how would you respond?
If Florida passed the law, and the legislature passed it, and it was the law in Florida that we were to ask for that citizenship status, and the only thing was the Department of Justice just from an opinion standpoint told us not to enforce that law.
Or was in the process of suing the state of Florida because
unless or until some judge tells us not to enforce it, we enforce it. You know.
And would that affect any of your grant funding?
I don't. Well, because it's a hypothetical, because we don't have the law, you really don't know. But I can't.
I think the question is, how firmly would you stand in support of requesting that proof and push back against the federal government?
If all it was an opinion by the federal government trying to affect what is state law, my job is to enforce state law. And we're going to enforce state law, and just because there's an opinion by somebody sitting up in Washington that says we don't think you should do, until some judge tells us otherwise, we're going to do it. And I think that the federal government, oftentimes with their opinions, tends to be overreaching and tends to impose their will on the state government. I kind of experienced that today, but and just because you got somebody sitting up there that thinks something, we don't take our direction from the federal government. And if the Florida legislature has passed that law and spoken to it, then that's what we need to do.
And I'll let you expand on the issue you alluded to. If you'd just like to enlighten the room about the recent St. Petersburg Times story this morning about the law that requires you to quit before you can run for office.
Sure. Before I announced my candidacy, I wanted to make sure that I did absolutely everything according to the law. And I did absolutely everything the right way. I called the Florida Commission on Ethics. I asked them a lot of questions about a lot of different things. What was permissible, what was not permissible. I looked at the election laws. I looked at Chapter 30, which is the law that regulates sheriffs in Florida. I knew that this thing called the Hatch Act was out there. I did a lot of research on it and made sure that I was comfortable that what I was doing was the right thing, the legal thing. The Hatch Act has been on the books for almost 70 years. And it was a law that was designed to prevent people in Washington who are making decisions about federal funding from engaging in politics and trying to oppose certain things or gain support for certain things by making financial promises with grants. So what it was designed to oppose was somebody who has the authority to issue grants and to dole out grant money from influence of political race. It is only, and first of all, it's an administrative law. It is not a criminal law. It is purely administrative, purely civil. And what it says is, and they've extended it down to local governments, beyond the federal government, is that a local government official who is a member of the executive branch of local government is prohibited from engaging in a partisan political race. So you have to be a member of the executive branch of local government, and then you can't engage in a partisan political race. So the key, and the question was, and is the sheriff's office part of the executive branch of government? Sheriffs in Florida are independent constitutional officers. There is a case, there's a law from Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeal, and that's the District Court of Appeal whose decisions are binding in Pinellas County, that says sheriffs in Florida are not part of the executive branch of government. When you look at the Florida statutes, the Florida legislature set forth certain components of government, and under the Florida statutes placed them in certain places. Chapters, I believe, 1 through 11 are the executive branch. Sheriffs are not there. Sheriffs are not in the legislative branch. Sheriffs are in the judicial branch. That's where the legislature put them. Sheriffs are not part of the executive branch. There are other cases in other states where the Merit Service Protection Board, which is responsible for enforcing the Hatch Act, is brought actions forth against a candidate for sheriff. And the Merit Service Protection Board has found that the Office of Special Counsel did not meet their burden in finding that the sheriff was part of the executive branch. There is not one, nowhere, there is not one court decision saying under the Hatch Act that sheriffs in Florida are part of the executive branch. It is an opinion by the Office of Special Counsel. The Office of Special Counsel is no different than the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, the Clearwater Police Department, the State Attorney's Office. They're lawyers who investigate something, and it's their opinion, and solely their opinion, that the Hatch Act applies to sheriffs in Florida. This is political fodder. This is about the 6th time that I know of that it's happened. It happened most recently last year to Sheriff Larry Ashley in Okaloosa County. He was the chief deputy up there. They filed a Hatch Act complaint, and he stood his ground and said he's not going to be bullied, like I'm not going to be bullied by political opponents or by somebody sitting in Washington that has an opinion. Sheriff Ashley stood his ground. He didn't resign as the chief deputy, and today he's the sitting sheriff in Okaloosa County. Sheriff Mike Scott down in Lee County went through this. Sheriff Bill Cameron in Charlotte County went through this. Sheriff Rance Bach down in Collier County went through it. Sheriff Perry down in Monroe County went through it, and they're all sitting sheriffs today.
Well, I like the way that comes out.
There's a bill pending in the United States Congress right now. It's in committee in Congress right now, today, to amend the Hatch Act, and it is co-sponsored by 21 members of Congress to specifically eliminate sheriffs from the Hatch Act.
Cool, who do we call and write?
All of those representatives, and call Bill Young or Dustbill Rapids. The Florida legislature has spoken to this issue. And what the law is in Florida under Chapter 30 is that if you're the chief deputy or you're an employee of the sheriff's office, you can run for the office of sheriff. There is no resign to run law as long as you're not running against the incumbent. That's what the Florida legislature has said. That's the framework in Florida. That's Florida state law. And I really have a problem with some lawyers sitting up in Washington based on no court decision and their view of some arcane 70-year-old law that is all about politics, trying to tell me that I've got to either withdraw from this race, and I'm not doing it.
Good for you.
Because I'm going to stand my ground, and we'll take it all the way to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals if we have to. And if a judge decides at some point that it does apply, then I'll respect that decision. And I'll respect the rule of law, but I'm not going to respect the opinion of some lawyer sitting up in Washington.
Those scholars up there.
And a follow-up question to that. Has the hashtag been applied equitably in Pinellas County?
Oh, no, absolutely not. It absolutely not hasn't been. When Jim Coates was the chief deputy to Everett Rice in 2003 and in 2004, this law has been in the books for 70 years. We've taken grant funding for many years in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, including 2003 and 2004. And when Jim Coates was the chief deputy, endorsed and supported by Everett Rice, and an announced candidate for sheriff and engaging in a campaign, Everett Rice didn't have a problem with it then. And he supported Jim Coates, and now he seems to have a problem with it.
Because he's not going to live.
Little picking and choosing going on there. So, no, it hasn't been. And other sheriffs have experienced, this has gone on every place. Now all of a sudden it's a problem.
Is there term limits for sheriff?
No, there's not term limits for sure.
Next question. Around in April of this year, Sheriff Coates told legislators that if the concealed weapons license reform bill passed, that law enforcement would be, quote, drawing down on license holders. Would you care to comment on this?
Well, I wasn't there. I didn't hear the comment. I don't know the context in which it was said. Of course, I heard what was reported in the media about it. I don't think that any law enforcement officer can or should, quote, draw down on citizens. The only time that a law enforcement officer has the authority, right, or should draw down on anybody is if they're dealing with a situation where somebody is a threat to themselves or somebody else. And so that's the only circumstance that is permissible. I don't see a situation where our law enforcement officers are going to run around drawing their guns.
And last question. What is considered legal when defending yourself and property against crime? And I would assume, let's just do two examples, your car versus your home.
Well, recently, fairly recently, Florida no longer has a law where you have to retreat. Is that you can never use deadly force. A law enforcement officer can't use deadly force to protect property. If somebody's car is being burglarized out there in the parking lot and somebody is reaching in and taking a stereo and running, I or you or anybody else can or should use deadly force against that person. But a citizen, a law enforcement officer, especially with the amendment to the Florida statute a few years ago where you don't have to retreat, is you can stand your ground and you can use deadly force as long as you believe that you are in imminent threat of great personal harm. Really, a citizen's right to use deadly force in that situation in Florida, since the stand your ground law, is really the same right that a law enforcement officer has.
Now, I know that it has been said that you need to drag the person in your house after you shoot them. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, and that's, that statement was made years ago before the stand your ground law, because prior to the stand your ground law is that you had a duty and obligation to retreat, and the only place you didn't have a duty or obligation to retreat was if it was your house. But now with the stand your ground law, that really doesn't matter anymore.
I'm going to take one last question from this gentleman here, and then that will have to be the end
Until you're elected,
Yes.
what assurances do we have that you're representing the people as opposed to your employer?
I think it's my track record and what I've done. And everything I'm telling you here tonight is everything that I have walked the walk and talked the talk. It's not just about saying it, it's about doing it. And I've proven to you by my history, and especially what I've done in the last 4 years, and that's the best indicator you have of how I'll act in the future. And I'd suggest to you, since you asked the question, it's the best indicator of how Everett Rice would act. He grew the budget by $80 million. It's not what you say, it's what you do.